Hey everyone, I'm so glad to see you all. By the way, where are you watching from? I'm from Texas, America. Write in the comments, I look forward to your comments. It's so exciting to know where you're all from. Dad visits his black daughter at school, shocked by teacher's lunch, calls 911. Ben had been feeling uneasy for weeks. As a single father with a demanding job, he struggled to balance his responsibilities between work and parenting. Recently, something had seemed off with Layla, his 10-year-old daughter. At first, he thought it was just a phase, or perhaps she was stressed from school. But over time, her behavior began to change. She became withdrawn, quiet, even skittish, like she was carrying a secret too heavy for her young heart. Ben knew something was wrong, and that it was time to look closer. One chilly Wednesday, he made an unexpected decision he would visit Layla at school during lunch. He didn't inform her or the school in advance he wanted to see the school in its natural state. It was a sprawling, old building with worn bricks and ivy creeping up the sides. The architecture was imposing, with narrow windows and heavy doors, almost fortress-like, which seemed strange for a place meant for children. As he parked and walked up to the school, a chill ran down his spine, though he couldn't say why. Inside, he navigated the maze like hallways filled with the sounds of echoing voices, footsteps, and lockers slamming shut. Lining the walls were motivational posters featuring bright, cheerful slogans like "Eat well, play hard," and "Healthy food, healthy minds." He found the cafeteria. A vast space filled with long rows of tables where children sat quietly in neat lines, eating their lunches. But something felt off. The air was thick and silent, with only the occasional clink of utensils and murmurs of conversation. None of the usual noise and laughter that he associated with school lunch periods were there. Then he spotted Layla. She sat alone, her face pale, and her posture slumped as if the very act of sitting up took all her energy. She barely touched the food on her tray, just pushing it around, as if reluctant to eat. Ben's heart ached. This was not the cheerful girl he knew. Her energy, her laughter, where had it all gone? He approached quietly, not wanting to startle her. When he called her name softly, she looked up with wide, startled eyes. For a moment, relief flashed across her face, but it was quickly replaced by worry. She looked around, as if afraid someone would see them. Ben sat across from her, his eyes falling on the tray in front of her. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. The food was disturbing. A grayish-brown meat patty sat in the center, limp and greasy, with a thin, sickly sheen covering it. Next to it were a few discolored vegetables, limp and shriveled, and a scoop of mashed potatoes that looked more like paste than food. The potatoes had an odd, almost chemical smell to them. As he examined it closer, he could feel his stomach turning. How could anyone serve this to children? "Layla, is this what they give you every day?" he whispered, trying to keep his voice calm. She glanced around before nodding, looking down at her tray. Her small hands clenched her fork, but she made no move to eat. "Yes, Daddy, it's what we get every day." Her voice was barely audible, and there was a tremor in it that Ben hadn't heard before. He felt a surge of anger rising within him. How could they feed this to children? This was supposed to be a place of learning and growth. Yet they were given something that barely resembled food. The meat looked like it had been processed beyond recognition, and the vegetables were shriveled and gray. It was an insult not only to the children but to the parents who trusted the school to care for them. "Layla," he said, trying to keep his tone gentle, "why haven't you told me about this? You don't have to eat this if it's not good." She looked up, her eyes filled with something that looked like fear. They told us not to complain. That this is what we're given, and we should be grateful." Her gaze flickered around the room, as if she was afraid someone might overhear them. Ben's heart clenched. "What do you mean they told you not to complain? Who said that?" Layla bit her lip, glancing nervously at the cafeteria staff. They were watching, he realized, their eyes fixed on the children with an intensity that was unsettling. "They just told us. And if anyone says something, they don't come back to school. They say they moved, but..." Her voice trailed off, and she looked away, her hands shaking. Ben felt a chill go down his spine. He'd heard stories, of course, about schools cutting costs, about poorly funded lunch programs, but this was beyond that. There was something almost sinister about the way the staff watched over the children. The silence in the cafeteria. The fear in his daughter's eyes. Ben's hand tightened around the edge of the table. "Layla, it's going to be okay. I promise." Just then, a cafeteria worker approached them. She was tall and thin, her face expressionless, her eyes cold and hollow. She had a tray in her hands, which she set down on the table with a loud clatter, making Layla flinch. The woman looked at Ben with an unnerving smile. "Is there a problem with the food, sir?" she asked in a voice that was too polite, her smile too tight. Ben met her gaze, his own expression hardening. "Yes, there is. This isn't food fit for children. This isn't food fit for anyone." The woman's smile didn't falter. She tilted her head slightly, as if amused. "Our meals meet the school's dietary standards, Mr. Ben." "Mr. Ben," he replied coldly. The woman nodded, her smile never wavering. "If you're unhappy, perhaps you would prefer to provide Layla's meals from home. Of course, we would require prior notice of any food brought in to ensure it meets our..." The way she said it, with that twisted little smile, sent a chill through Ben. This wasn't a polite suggestion. It was a threat, thinly veiled behind a mask of courtesy. Ben felt his anger rising, but he held himself back. He wouldn't make a scene, not here, not in front of Layla. But this wasn't over. He stood up, taking Layla's hand. "We're leaving," he said firmly, his voice steady but filled with a quiet rage. The woman's smile faded slightly, but she didn't stop them. She simply watched as they walked away, her gaze cold and predatory. As they walked out of the cafeteria, Ben felt the weight of other eyes on them. Staff members, watching from the edges of the room, their expressions blank but their eyes cold. The atmosphere was suffocating, oppressive. Ben's heart pounded as he guided Layla toward the main exit. When they reached the door, a familiar figure blocked their path. Mrs. Clark, the school principal. She was a tall, stern woman with piercing eyes that seemed to look right through him. She looked down at Layla with a smile that was anything but kind before turning her gaze to Ben. "Mr. Ben," she said smoothly. "Leaving so soon?" Ben took a deep breath, his hand tightening around Layla's. "Yes, I'm taking my daughter home. And believe me, I'll be back with questions." Mrs. Clark's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm sure we'll see you again soon, Mr. Ben. I do hope you'll find the answers you're looking for." Her words hung in the air, carrying a dark, unspoken warning. Ben held Layla close as they walked out, his mind racing with questions and fear. What was happening in this school? What were they feeding the children? And why was everyone so determined to keep it quiet? As they reached the car, Ben made a silent promise to himself. He would get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. He would find out what was really going on, and he would make sure that Layla, and every other child in that school, was safe. After a sleepless night, Ben knew he couldn't let what he had seen slide. The image of Layla's tray, the grotesque, unrecognizable meal, and her quiet, fearful voice haunted him. It was clear that something terrible was happening at that school. But his anger was mixed with a mounting sense of fear. Fear for his daughter, and a deeper, more unsettling fear that maybe he was too late. Determined, Ben dialed the local police department early the next morning. As the line connected, he heard the familiar, steady voice of the operator. "County Police Department. How may I assist you?" "Yes, I'd like to report a concern about my daughter's school lunch program," Ben began, trying to keep his voice steady. "Something doesn't seem right with the food they're serving. I think they might be using some sort of unsafe practices." "Sir, I can transfer you to our public health department, but without specific evidence of a health violation, it may take some time to act. Could you provide any details that might expedite this?" Ben's jaw tightened. He needed more than an open complaint. He needed answers and action. "I'll call back." "Thank you," replied, though he was frustrated. He had little to no concrete proof beyond the few photos he'd taken and Layla's fearful words. He needed more. Determined, he pulled up the school's website and searched for staff contacts. Principal Clark's email address flashed on the screen, and Ben started typing furiously. Subject: urgent concern regarding cafeteria meals. Dear Principal Clark, after visiting the school cafeteria yesterday, I'm deeply concerned about the quality and safety of the food provided to students. What I witnessed was both shocking and unacceptable. The meal served to my daughter appeared neither fresh nor safe for consumption, and I am compelled to understand more about the ingredients and standards being enforced at your school. I would appreciate your immediate response and details regarding the food vendors, health standards, and quality checks in place. This issue must be addressed promptly, as I am sure you understand. Sincerely, Ben Harrison. After hitting send, he sat back, unsure of what kind of response he would receive, if any. But his patience was short. Determined to gather more evidence, he decided to visit Layla's school cafeteria again that day, hoping to catch the administration off guard. When he arrived later that afternoon, he saw the school staff watching him as he entered. They seemed tense, as if they were expecting him. But he wouldn't be intimidated. Inside the cafeteria, the familiar woman from the day before was supervising the lunch line. Today, the children's trays held similar food to what he had seen the day before. A thick stew with an odd texture and a greenish tint. The meat in it looked even more questionable. The kind of meat one might find in pet food, not meant for human consumption. Steeling himself, Ben took a photo of the tray, making sure to capture every unsettling detail. Suddenly, he felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find the woman from yesterday, her eyes hard and her expression unreadable. "Mr. Harrison," she said softly, though there was a menace beneath her politeness. "We don't allow unauthorized photography in the cafeteria. If you have concerns, I suggest you bring them up with the administration." He could feel his heart pounding, but he forced himself to stay calm. "I have, and I will continue to do so. But as a parent, I have every right to know what my daughter is eating." The woman's face tightened. She didn't argue, but the warning in her eyes was clear. Without another word, she turned and walked away, but Ben felt that this was far from over. He could sense that they were watching him, perhaps even plotting how to handle his interference. He looked around, realizing that most of the staff kept their eyes on him, an unusual tension filling the room. There are elevated levels of a chemical compound commonly used in concentrated cleaning supplies. It can cause severe respiratory distress and has been linked to other symptoms, including neurological effects, the technician explained. Jenny felt her stomach drop. "Is it treatable?" "Yes, but we need to act fast. We'll administer the appropriate antidotes and monitor her closely for any signs of anaphylaxis or respiratory failure," the technician confirmed. Dr. Lee nodded, her expression steely. "Let's move. Jenny, I want you to assist in the treatment. Mark, keep an eye on the other patients and be ready to call for help if we need it." "Understood," Mark replied, his voice filled with urgency as he moved to gather supplies. As Jenny and Dr. Lee rushed back to Sarah's room, a sense of determination surged within her. They had identified the problem, and now they had a chance to save Sarah's life. When they entered the room, the atmosphere was tense. Sarah lay on the hospital bed, her breathing shallow and labored. Monitors beeped steadily, displaying concerning numbers that made Jenny's heart race. The team quickly moved into action, preparing the necessary treatments. "Jenny, I need you to set up the IV fluids," Dr. Lee instructed, her voice calm but commanding. "We need to stabilize her as much as possible before administering the antidote." Jenny's hands moved swiftly, her training kicking in as she worked to set up the IV line. She could feel the weight of the moment, the urgency coursing through her veins. This was a pivotal point for Sarah, and she was determined to make a difference. With the IV fluids in place, Dr. Lee began administering the antidote, her focus unwavering. Jenny monitored Sarah's vitals, the beeping of the machines a reminder of the gravity of the situation. As they worked, the tension in the room was palpable. Each second felt like an eternity, and the uncertainty of Sarah's condition hung heavy in the air. Jenny held her breath, willing her patient to pull through. Slowly, Sarah's breathing began to stabilize, and Jenny felt a glimmer of hope. The beeping machine started to show more encouraging numbers, and for the first time she felt a sense of relief wash over her. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Lee stepped back, wiping her brow with a sense of accomplishment. "We did it. She's responding to the treatment," she said, a hint of a smile creeping onto her lips. Jenny couldn't help but smile back, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you, Dr. Lee. I couldn't have done it without your guidance." "Don't thank me yet. We need to continue monitoring her closely." "The next few hours will be crucial," Dr. Lee replied, her expression serious again. "But you did a great job, Jenny. You kept your cool under pressure." As they settled in to monitor Sarah's progress, Jenny felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had faced a daunting challenge together, and for the first time she felt confident in her ability to navigate the uncertainty of her profession. The atmosphere in the hospital was charged with a sense of urgency as Jenny and the medical team monitored Sarah's condition. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered intermittently, casting a harsh glow on the bustling emergency room. Outside, the sun began to set, its dying light filtering through the windows, creating an eerie juxtaposition between the calm of dusk and the chaos of the hospital. Sarah lay in the hospital bed, her pale face gradually regaining some color as the antidote took effect. The beeping of the monitors that had once echoed her struggles now sounded a steady rhythm, signaling that she was stabilizing. Jenny felt a wave of relief wash over her. But she knew that the danger wasn't over yet. Dr. Lee stood at the foot of the bed, reviewing Sarah's chart and jotting down notes with precision. We need to keep a close eye on her vitals for the next few hours. If she shows any signs of respiratory distress or anaphylaxis, we'll need to intervene quickly. She instructed, her tone authoritative yet calm. Jenny nodded, her heart still racing as she remembered the anxiety of the last few hours. She had been caught in the whirlwind of uncertainty. But now, with Sarah's condition improving, her focus sharpened. What are the next steps? Should we call for the toxicology department to run additional tests? Yes, definitely. They'll want to know the specifics of what she was exposed to. We also need to document everything we've done so far, Dr. Lee replied, glancing at Jenny. You've been doing an excellent job today. Your instincts were right on point. Thank you, Dr. Lee, Jenny said, feeling a sense of pride swelling within her. I just hope we can prevent this from happening again, not just for Sarah, but for anyone else who might be at risk. As they prepared to gather the necessary documentation, the door swung open, and a tall figure entered the room. It was Mia, Sarah's co-worker, her face a mask of concern. Is Sarah okay? She asked, her voice trembling. I've been worried sick since I heard what happened. She's stable for now, but we're still monitoring her closely, Jenny reassured her. Can you tell me more about those cleaning supplies? We need to understand exactly what happened at your workplace. Mia nodded, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. I'll go get the safety data sheets and any other information I can find. I just can't believe this happened. We've used those supplies before without issue. But this batch felt different. There was a strong chemical smell, and I remember Sarah mentioning a headache after using them. Jenny's heart sank. The situation was more serious than she had anticipated. That's crucial information, Mia. If the cleaning supplies were improperly labeled or concentrated, it could put others at risk. We need to alert the authorities. As Mia hurried off to gather more information, Jenny returned her focus to Sarah. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was an unseen danger lurking just beneath the surface of this incident. What if Sarah wasn't the only one affected? What if there were others at the workplace experiencing similar symptoms? Dr. Lee, I think we should consider reaching out to the local health department, Jenny suggested. If these cleaning supplies are dangerous, they need to be investigated before anyone else gets hurt. Agreed, Dr. Lee replied, her expression serious. I'll make the call. In the meantime, I want you to help Mia gather any reports or documentation from Sarah's workplace that can give us insight into the situation. As Dr. Lee stepped out to make the call, Jenny took a deep breath, steeling herself for the task ahead. She felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about saving Sarah anymore. It was about uncovering a potential threat that could endanger countless others. Moments later, Mia returned, clutching a stack of papers. Here they are, she said, her voice shaky but determined. These are the safety data sheets for the cleaning supplies we received, along with the delivery invoice. Jenny took the documents, her fingers trembling with anticipation. She began flipping through the pages, searching for any information that could provide insight into the chemicals involved. As she read through the sheets, her heart sank further. The cleaning agents listed included compounds known to cause severe respiratory issues and neurological symptoms if not handled properly. This isn't good, Jenny murmured, showing the sheets to Mia. These chemicals are highly concentrated and require strict safety precautions. If anyone on your team used them without proper dilution, it could have serious consequences. Mia's eyes widened in horror. I can't believe this. We had no idea it was that dangerous. We always thought they were safe because the supplier marketed them as environmentally friendly. It's misleading marketing. And it could have serious repercussions, Jenny replied, her mind racing. We need to report this to the health department immediately. This could be a larger issue than just Sarah's case. Just then, Dr. Lee returned, her expression grave. I've contacted the local health department, and they're sending a team to investigate. They'll want to speak with you, Mia, about what happened at your workplace. Mia nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I'll do whatever I can to help. I just want to make sure Sarah and everyone else are safe. As the three of them gathered around the hospital bed, Sarah began to stir. Her eyelids fluttered open, and she squinted at the bright lights above. What happened? She whispered, her voice weak and raspy. "You're in the hospital, Sarah. You had a reaction to some cleaning supplies at work," Jenny explained gently, hoping to provide some comfort. "But you're stable now, and we're doing everything we can to help you." Sarah blinked slowly, processing the information. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble," she murmured, her voice filled with guilt. "I thought it was just stress. I didn't want to worry anyone." "It's not your fault," Sarah Mia interjected, her voice firm. "You had no way of knowing those supplies were dangerous. We need to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Dr. Lee nodded in agreement. "We're going to ensure that your case is taken seriously. We'll work together to investigate this situation and prevent further incidents." Sarah looked between the three of them, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you for being here. I didn't think anyone would care." "You're not alone in this," Sarah Jenny assured her, her heart swelling with empathy. "We're in this together." As the conversation continued, Jenny felt a sense of solidarity growing among them. They were all part of a larger battle against an unseen danger that had crept into their lives. It was no longer just about one patient, it was about the health and safety of an entire community. After several more minutes of discussion, a nurse entered the room, interrupting their moment. "Dr. Lee, we have a situation in the triage area. A group of people from Sarah's workplace have come in reporting similar symptoms," she said, her expression urgent. Dr. Lee's eyes widened. "This is what we feared. Jenny, Mia, we need to move now. We have to address this before it spirals out of control." Jenny's heart raced as they followed Dr. Lee out of the room. The emergency department was now filled with individuals who had begun to show similar signs of distress. The atmosphere shifted from a focus on Sarah to a more chaotic scene as nurses and doctors mobilized to assess the incoming patients. As they reached the triage area, Jenny felt a wave of determination surge within her. They were on the front line of a potential crisis, and she knew she had to do everything in her power to help those who had been affected. The stakes were higher than ever, and she was ready to face the unseen danger that had infiltrated their lives. "Let's split up and start assessing patients," Dr. Lee instructed, her voice steady amidst the chaos. "We need to identify any common symptoms and ensure that everyone is receiving appropriate care." Jenny took a deep breath, channeling her anxiety into action. She and Mia moved to the first patient, a middle-aged man with labored breathing. "What's going on?" Jenny asked, her tone calm as she began to assess his condition. "I started feeling dizzy at work. Then I had trouble breathing," he said, his voice shaky. "A few of my coworkers are experiencing the same thing." Jenny exchanged a worried glance with Mia. "Have you been using any cleaning supplies recently? Anything new or different?" "Yes, we just got a new shipment in," the man replied, a look of realization crossing his face. "It's those cleaning products. I thought they were safe, but now I'm not so sure." As the officers secured the area, Ben allowed himself a moment to breathe. He had faced a terrifying situation, but he knew he had done the right thing. He thought of Layla safe at home, and felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just about him anymore, it was about protecting the children at this school and making sure no one else had to go through what he had. The reality of the night's events began to settle in. With the police now on his side, Ben felt a sense of purpose igniting within him. He had a story to tell, and he would make sure everyone knew about the horrors that had been happening in the school kitchen. It was time to shine a light on the darkness. The air in the kitchen was thick with tension as the officers worked to secure the scene. Ben stood to the side, his heart still racing from the close call with the worker. He watched as one of the officers, a woman with a determined look in her eyes, meticulously documented the various containers and their unsettling labels. Each entry was a reminder of the horrors that had almost been inflicted on the children of the school, including Layla. "All right, let's get some more eyes on this place," the officer called out, her voice steady despite the chaos. She signaled for another officer to radio for additional backup and a health inspector. Ben couldn't shake the feeling that they were just scratching the surface of something much larger. As the officers continued their work, Ben approached one of them, a tall man with a serious demeanor. "What's going to happen now?" Ben asked, anxiety creeping into his voice. "Are you going to arrest the workers? Will the school be shut down?" The officer turned to him, his expression softening slightly. "We'll need to gather all the evidence first. The health inspector will help us determine the extent of the violations. If what you found is as serious as it looks, we'll take action against the school and those involved." Ben felt a surge of hope at the officer's words, but it was quickly overshadowed by the thought of what might happen to Layla if the situation continued. I just want to make sure my daughter is safe, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Rest assured, sir. We'll do everything we can, the officer replied, placing a reassuring hand on Ben's shoulder. Your bravery tonight has already made a difference. Just then, the sound of sirens echoed through the building as backup arrived. More officers poured into the kitchen, taking in the scene with wide eyes. They were met with the grim reality of the situation, the dark truth hidden behind the school's walls. Ben felt a mix of satisfaction and dread. They were finally confronting the nightmare. But the battle was far from over. A few moments later, a health inspector arrived. A middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense attitude. She immediately set to work, examining the containers and taking notes. This is beyond alarming, she muttered, shaking her head as she reviewed the contents. We need to shut this down and get to the bottom of what's been happening here. Ben watched intently as the inspector documented everything, feeling a sense of urgency building within him. He wanted to share everything he had uncovered, every detail from the notebooks and his own observations. I have more information, he said, stepping forward. I found these notebooks in the kitchen. They detail how the food is sourced and the shady suppliers involved. The inspector raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Show me, she said, gesturing for him to hand them over. Ben quickly fished the notebooks from his backpack and handed them to her, his heart pounding with anticipation. He watched as she flipped through the pages, her expression shifting from curiosity to shock as she read. This is serious, she said, looking up at him, her voice low. These entries are detailing illegal practices, substandard ingredients, health violations, and even potential health risks to children. We need to act quickly. As she continued to read, Ben felt a mix of pride and fear. This was at the moment when everything could change. The police had the evidence they needed, and he was part of it. But what would happen to the school? What would happen to the staff involved? The thought sent a chill down his spine. Where are the school administrators? One of the officers asked, breaking Ben from his thoughts. We need to speak to them immediately. I think the principal's office is down the hall, Ben replied, pointing toward the administrative wing. I can show you. The officers moved swiftly, and Ben led the way, his mind racing with what lay ahead. As they reached the principal's office, Ben hesitated. Would the principal have answers, or would he be just another cog in the wheel of this dangerous operation? One of the officers knocked on the door, but there was no response. He pushed it open, revealing a dark office cluttered with papers and a half-eaten sandwich left on the desk. It's empty, the officer said, scanning the room for any signs of life. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway, and they turned to see the principal approaching, looking disheveled and panicked. What's going on here? He demanded, trying to maintain an air of authority. We need to talk, the officer said firmly, stepping forward. You're going to explain what's been happening in this school and why your kitchen is filled with dangerous food supplies. The principal's face paled as he glanced past the officers at the chaos unfolding in the kitchen. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered, backing away. I'm just the principal. Ben stepped forward, anger boiling within him. You know exactly what's going on. You've been putting our kids at risk for profit. It's time you take responsibility for your actions. The principal's eyes darted between Ben and the officers, his bravado faltering. I had no idea the food was that bad. We only wanted to save money for the school, he pleaded, his voice trembling. Saving money shouldn't come at the cost of children's health, one of the officers shot back. You're complicit in this scheme. We're going to need a full statement from you, and we'll be reviewing your financial records as well. Ben felt a surge of satisfaction as the principal's facade crumbled. The truth was finally surfacing, and justice was beginning to take shape. The officers handcuffed the principal, leading him out of the office, his protests echoing in the hallway. As the night wore on, Ben watched the scene unfold. Officers interviewed the remaining cafeteria staff, collecting evidence and statements. The health inspector made calls to local health authorities, ensuring that the school would be shut down immediately. Thank you for your bravery tonight, the officer said to Ben, stepping away from the chaos for a moment. Without you, we wouldn't have uncovered this operation. Your actions might have saved lives. Ben felt a mixture of pride and relief wash over him. I just want to make sure my daughter and all the other kids are safe, he replied, his voice steady. This shouldn't happen again. As dawn began to break, the first rays of sunlight filtered through the school's windows, illuminating the remnants of the night's turmoil. Ben knew that while they had uncovered a dark secret, the fight for accountability was far from over. this was just the beginning. With the school closed and the staff in custody, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. But as he thought of Layla, still blissfully unaware of the danger she had faced, he couldn't help but worry about the lasting impact of this experience. Would they ever feel safe in the school again? Would the scars of this night linger long after the dust settled? In that moment, he made a silent vow he would advocate for the safety of children everywhere. No child should ever have to worry about what's on their plate. Together with the police, he would ensure that their voices would be heard loud and clear. As he left the school grounds, a sense of purpose filled him. They had fought a battle against the darkness, but he was determined to ensure that the light of truth would shine through. The nightmare was over, but the journey to healing and accountability was just beginning. Months had passed since that harrowing night at the school, but the memories still lingered in Ben's mind, vivid and unyielding. The air was crisp as autumn set in, and leaves turned vibrant shades of red and gold, a stark contrast to the dark reality that had unfolded in the school kitchen. The closure of the school had sent shockwaves through the community, and the news of the scandal had spread like wildfire. As Ben walked through the neighborhood, he noticed families gathering for their usual weekend routines. Children played outside, laughing and enjoying their freedom. He felt a mix of relief and anxiety while the children were safe now. The scars of that experience remained etched in his heart. Layla, blissfully unaware of the darkness that had lurked in her school, was thriving in her new environment. After the school closure, Ben and his wife decided to enroll her in a new school, one that emphasized health, safety, and transparency. They had visited the new school together, and Layla's eyes lit up at the sight of colorful classrooms and smiling teachers. It felt like a fresh start, a chance to leave behind the fears of the past. One sunny afternoon, Ben and Layla sat together in their backyard, surrounded by the vibrant colors of fall. They were enjoying a picnic, Layla's favorite sandwiches packed neatly in a basket. As they shared laughter and stories, Ben felt a sense of gratitude wash over him. He had fought fiercely to protect his daughter, and now he was witnessing the fruits of that labor. "Dad, can we go to the park after this?" Layla asked, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Of course. We'll play on the swings and maybe grab some ice cream afterward," Ben replied, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. He loved seeing her happy and carefree, a stark contrast to the worry that had plagued him for so long. Just then, his phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him back to reality. It was a message from Detective Williams, the officer who had led the investigation. "Can we meet? Important updates regarding the case." A knot tightened in Ben's stomach. Despite the progress that had been made, a sense of unease lingered. He quickly replied, agreeing to meet at a nearby cafe later that afternoon. Layla was excited about their plans, but he knew he needed to address this first. As he walked to the cafe, memories of that fateful night flooded back: the fear, the adrenaline, and the resolve to protect his daughter. The image of the cafeteria worker wielding a knife still haunted him. He shook his head, trying to focus on the present. He had to trust that the authorities had taken steps to ensure the safety of the community. Arriving at the cafe, Ben spotted Detective Williams seated at a table, looking serious but approachable. He joined her, taking a seat across from her. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, trying to gauge her expression. "Thanks for coming, Ben," she replied, her voice steady. "I wanted to give you an update on the investigation and the outcomes for those involved in the scandal." Ben leaned in, heart racing. "What happened? Are the people responsible going to be held accountable?" Williams took a deep breath. "Yes, the principal and several staff members have been charged with multiple offenses, including endangerment and fraud. The investigation revealed a network of illegal food suppliers, and the health department has stepped in to ensure these practices are stopped." Relief washed over Ben, but it was accompanied by a tinge of anger. "What about the children? What about their health? They were putting them at risk."